My next speaker is Joe Kaufman. Joe and I go back quite a ways, actually. He's spoken at some of my other conferences. This is somewhat of a departure for me. I've done the Intelligence Summit that I co-founded with John Loftus, founder of Florida Holocaust Museum, former Department of Justice war crimes investigator and prosecutor. Did that, and Joe spoke for me back then at the Intelligence Summit. And Joe almost got me sued. But it wasn't Joe. it was his topic. Joe had a topic, CARE, a terrorist organization. And I was contacted by Nihan Awad, and he basically threatened me with a lawsuit and other threats and whatnot. I've been threatened by the best, you can believe it. And I said, Joe, do you mind if I change the title? And he's like, what do you mean? My title, I said, don't worry, I just want to put a different punctuation. I want to make it CARE, a terrorist organization, with a question mark at the end. And then I wrote a letter on my Intelligence Summit stationery that basically said, Dear Nihal Awad, I cordially invite you to the Intelligence Summit to speak as a panelist in debate with Mr. Joseph Kaufman, and because I realize that you are an expert on terrorism. Joe Kaufman.
Thank you. So as Bob mentioned before we left for lunch, I am actually running for U.S. Congress. Thanks. So I was the 2014 and 2016 Republican nominee against Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And God willing, the 2018 winner against Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Thanks. Anyway, apart from running for Congress, which is really a dream of mine, this is my fourth time doing so, but I have another self, I have another hat that I wear, and that is doing this research and writing and lectures regarding counterterrorism issues. I've been doing that since shortly before 9/11. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I got involved in this, and I'm going to give you some examples through my involvement on the dangers of this movement locally, meaning what was the title of my thing? The Jihadi Next Door? Something like that. Something to that tune. Exactly that tune. Anyhow, so I had been approached by a friend of mine. He and a colleague, he had met an individual that he wanted me to meet that was involved with the Likud party in Israel. This is a number of years back. And I had met with this individual, and I told him of my political aspirations, as I'm dealing with today. And he said that a great way that I can show my face and get my message out to the public was to write a column for this newspaper that he was just starting. He was financing this newspaper, and he wanted me to have a column. And at the time, the newspaper was called the Jewish Israeli Magazine. Today, it's called Isra Post. The great thing about this newspaper, this is a South Florida newspaper, and you may have not seen it so much because it's not in huge circulation. I think to this day it's not in huge circulation. Well, I'm sure it's a little more than it was. But the great thing about this newspaper was that it was in English and Hebrew. And that was also a problem for the newspaper, because as I learned quickly, I was dealing with and I was working with all Israelis, and none of the people that I was working with, God bless them, but none of them really had great English skills. So the English section of the newspaper was suffering big time. It didn't look real. So they hired me to be the editor of the English section, which I was for a number of years. Now, as editor of a newspaper, we received a lot of information from the outside, and I also was able to make contacts in Israel with pretty high-ranking individuals. They wanted me to interview a lot of people, and if you know any Israelis, some may be in this crowd as we speak, but if you know any Israelis, you know that most Israelis are connected to individuals involved in intelligence, or certainly involved in the military, with people in the government. So I had a chance to speak to a lot of people. Well, also at that time, we were getting emails. And sometimes when you're involved in a newspaper, some of the emails you get sometimes are crazy, sometimes conspiracy theories. And we started receiving some conspiracy theories, or what I thought were conspiracy theories, 4 to 5 months prior to 9/11. And these emails were discussing a large-scale attack that was going to happen inside the United States. Now, at the time, I thought it was, quite frankly, BS. I thought there was no truth to any of this. Really, I was not a researcher. I did some research, political research on opponents and things of that nature, but I was never a big researcher. But as I was getting these emails, and they were coming infrequently, I started looking into what I was seeing. And sometimes I had to get things translated from Arabic. And I was involved with a group. It was a Zionist group in Miami. It was a small group that we used to get together, and we used to talk about the problems that Israel was going through with regards to, hey, Mayor Stembridge. Mayor Stembridge remembers this. Mayor Stembridge, everybody, Mayor Stembridge, a great man, a really great man, John Stembridge. We talk about the problems that Israel was going through, mostly regarding the issue of terrorism, PLO, Hamas, et cetera, et cetera. But what I was seeing with this information had nothing to do with Israel. It had everything to do with violence towards the United States. So I started doing this research, and it seemed real. And I remember, and it seems strange to me today, and I don't really talk about this too much, but I think it's very interesting. I remember because I had a large email list of political contacts. And I would send out these emails, and I probably sounded like the sky was falling. And certainly today, I wouldn't send out anything like this. But my emails back then, they were very serious to me, and I thought something was happening. And I wanted to alert people, and so I would send these out. Now, some people were offended by these things because these things dealt with Muslims and Arabs. But for me, they were reality. I truly believed it at the time. And most people didn't say anything, and some people wanted to hear more, whatever the case. But I truly believe something was taking place. And so exactly 1 month prior to 9/11, I wrote this article called Righteous Assassinations. And in this article, I predicted 9/11. This was exactly 1 month prior to the 9/11 attacks. And I said, I dare say the World Trade Center bombing was no aberration. Sadly, though, it will take another tragedy such as that one, God forbid, to make people begin to see reality. I didn't know whether anything was going to target the World Trade Center, but I had known at that time that the World Trade Center was already a target, and I truly believed something was going to happen. And 1 month later, it did. And at that time, I was going to Miami frequently. I started working for a law firm in Miami, and I remember seeing, it was shortly after 9/11, there were flags flying on everybody's windows. Remember this? This was after 9/11. People put flags on their windows. A few months later, the flags were gone. But at least after 9/11, people cared about it. And I remember pulling over to the side of the road, and I broke down. And not the car, but me personally. And I said to myself, because I had never served in the military, I said to myself, I need to serve my country in some way. And at that moment, I devoted my life to fighting terrorism, which I have ever since then. And so when we went for this Zionist group in Miami, I remember it was 2 weeks after 9/11, and there were weeks already before 9/11 that I was asking people to do research with me, and nobody seemed to want to do anything like that. And finally, 2 weeks after 9/11, this woman came up to me. It was a woman that, correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor, she I don't know if you remember her, Bayla Rabinowitz, but she was very quiet. She just sat there. She didn't have much to say. But 2 weeks after 9/11, she came up to me and she said, Joe, you've been asking people to do this research with you. I want to do this research. And so what we did, to make a long story short, is we went to her house. She had a number of computers, and we and we started doing and she asked me the question, what should we do? Where should we look first? This is a huge thing, but we have no idea. Well, this group that I'd started with another individual a short time before that, in like 1999, we had found this article on this Islamic Center in Boca Raton. It's called the Islamic Center of Boca Raton, ICBR. I'm sure most, if not all of you, have heard of this place since then. And on their website, they had an article called Why Can't the Jews, this is right off their website, Why Can't the Jews and Muslims Live Together in Peace? And on this article, they talk about Jews. And I'll read this quote, Jews are people of treachery and betrayal. It is not possible to trust them at all, as the Muslims and Jews are enemies residing in opposing religious and doctrinal camps. It is not possible for them to be brought together unless one is made to submit to the other by force. By force. The prophet said the hour, the day of judgment, will not begin until the Muslims fight the Jews and kill them. So we had sent out a press release regarding this, and it actually made worldwide news. We were in different news pieces around the world. And back then, remember, people cared about this issue. You know, it's not like today where everybody is politically correct about this, and you can't say one word when there's a radical Muslim. You know, you can't say one word today, but back then, people took notice. And so I said to Bela, why don't we start with the Islamic Center of Boca Raton? Because this was something that we already dealt with, not knowing that it had anything to do with Al-Qaeda or Hamas or anything to do with radical Islam or anything to do with 9/11. You know, we were a blank slate back then. But this was 2 weeks after 9/11, and there was a lot of material online, and I said, let's start over here. Well, we did start over there, and one of the first things that we found was that they were having a fundraising dinner. They were having a fundraising dinner to raise money for a new mosque that was going to build, the mosque that they have today. Now, there was a lot of politics, you know, behind where they were getting the money from, but one of the things that we had found, because shortly after 9/11, there were three organizations, the three largest Muslim organizations were shut down by the U.S. government, by the Bush administration. The Benevolence Foundation, the Holy Land Foundation. The Benevolence Foundation was raising millions for Al-Qaeda. The Holy Land Foundation, which was raising millions for Hamas. And the Global Relief Foundation, which was raising millions of dollars for Al-Qaeda as well, and also money for Hamas as well. And one thing that we found, and I actually corroborated it with an imam that I debated on a radio program, and we were in studio, and I debated him, and I asked him about this, and he knew about it. The Islamic Center of Boca Raton is listed in this financing report from the Global Relief Foundation as getting $600,000 for the building of a new mosque. It's in there. They actually received the most money by far of any organization that the Global Relief Foundation at the time was giving out. Now, I want to mention about the Islamic Center of Boca Raton. There's a number of things. Number one, the imam at the time when we were doing this research on the Islamic Center was a guy named Ibrahim Dramali. This individual, he credits me, and rightfully so, he credits me on getting him placed on the federal no-fly list. And I'm very proud to have done that. A radical through and through. He was involved with Egyptian Islamic Jihad. He was arrested at some point, and he left the Islamic Center, and he went to another Islamic center to preach. Unfortunately, he's still around today, although I think he's driving places instead of flying. But the imam that took his place was a guy named Munir Arafat. So Munir Arafat also had his his history. This guy, before he got to the Islamic Center of Boca Raton, his roommate was the individual who got the mobile satellite and the battery pack, had given that mobile satellite and battery pack to Osama bin Laden himself, and it was used in the bombing of the Tanzania and Kenya in 1998. The U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. That was this guy's roommate, Munir Arafat. I didn't get to this guy yet. I will. Arafat also. He was on the stand. He took the stand during the Sami al-Arian trial. Has everybody heard of Sami al-Arian? This was a leader of Palestinian Islamic Jihad that was trying to build and was successful in building an Islamic Jihad network in the Temple Terrace area of Tampa Bay, Florida. Today he's been deported since then. But what was I saying about Sami al-Arian? Sorry. Anyway, this individual, we're talking about Munir Arafat. So Munir Arafat is on the stand, and he is testifying regarding Sami al-Arian in the Sami al-Arian trial, and he admits on the stand that he himself was a member of Palestinian Islamic Jihad. So not only was this imam involved with an Al-Qaeda operative who basically got the equipment to murder a bunch of people and blow up 2 U.S. embassies, but he was also involved with Palestinian Islamic Jihad himself. Well, one of the co-founders of this mosque is a guy named Bassem al-Halabi. In fact, I'll also say that my colleague Bela Rabinowitz and I wish you were here to tell you, but we had created this list of things that Mr. al-Halabi was involved with, as well as his colleague Khalid Hamza. Khalid Hamza was also involved in the creation of the Islamic Center in Boca Raton. We had gotten in touch with Frank Brogan's office at FAU. He was the president of FAU. I think he had resigned as Jeb Bush's lieutenant governor, became the president of the university, and we had put together a list of things that we wanted to discuss with him, and we sent it. We sent a dossier of information to his office, and shortly after that, Mr. Hamza was fired. Now, unfortunately, al-Halabi was not fired, and we found out later on that the reason was because he had already received tenure, and it was a very difficult process to get rid of him because he had gone tenure. And we tried to get rid of, we tried to get him. Well, anyway, the background of this guy. So this guy was a research assistant for Sami al-Arian while al-Arian was creating this Islamic Jihad network in Tampa Bay. So this guy was located at the time with al-Arian. Now, at some point, he left Tampa and he went to FAU. Now, what's interesting is that when he applied for FAU, he used al-Arian as a reference on his application. Now, the school, I guess, maybe they didn't care, maybe they didn't look at it, maybe they just, threw the resume down or the CV or what have you. But I guess they didn't look into al-Arian's background to find out who this guy was working with. And there was another individual that this guy was working with named Hussam Abu Jabara, who was also involved in Islamic Jihad, and he's been deported as well from the United States. So this guy goes to FAU, Abu Jabara goes to Central Florida University, and al-Arian is at USF in Tampa. They made, a nice network of individuals. Maybe there was more that we never found out that was throughout the state of Florida. Who knows? I'm sure this is going on all across the country. At the time, we're focusing more in Florida, so we didn't know. But also, what was interesting about this individual was that he had been charged by the U.S. Commerce Department with shipping a $13,000 piece of military thermal imaging device, military equipment, to his brother in Damascus, Syria. Now, he was charged with a crime for doing that because evidently, at that time, shipping any type of military equipment to Syria was considered a harbor of of terrorists and a terrorist supporting country, as they still are. And so that was his involvement, but this is his mugshot from a different event that took place. So here we have, and this is a big danger from all of this. Certainly all of these things that I'm discussing, all of these bits and pieces about this Islamic Center show how this Islamic Center is a danger. There was also an individual that was taken into custody, given some like a 25-year sentence, named Rafiq Sabir, that was going to go off to Afghanistan to help Al Qaeda. I mean, there were tons of information, much more than that. You could go back into my writings and see a ton more regarding this organization. But the danger, one of the dangers, apart from the fact that this Islamic Center is involved in terrorism and shouldn't exist, period. One of the dangers is that as they continue to exist, people forget about the problems of the past. Now you have politicians, as a result of that, looking for votes. So you have people like Congressman Ted Deutsch, who just this past June stood in front of this mosque with their logos and gave a speech to the mosque. Now, he may think there's no problem in doing that, but both you and I understand that there's a huge problem in doing that. Because in doing that, if a congressman, a United States representative, is willing to sit in front of a radical mosque such as this one with links to, and I'll mention another individual in a moment that they're linked to, but links to Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Al Qaeda and Hamas as well. If he's willing to do that, what he's doing, he may be giving like an innocuous speech. He told them in his speech he's honored to stand in front of them. I mean, usually that's innocuous. All politicians stand in front of groups that they're speaking to, and they'll say that they're honored to stand in front of them. And by the way, I'm really honored to be here, but. But what he's doing is legitimizing. He's given legitimacy to a group that's involved in terrorism, a group that shouldn't exist inside the United States. I think we all understand that. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that are willing to overlook all of these different things from this Islamic Center and stand in front of them as this congressman did. Now, there was another co-founder of this mosque that I want to mention. His name was Syed Khorramad. So this individual, he was involved. So when Ms. Rabinowitz and I were doing this research, we found a terrorist charity. Now I'll tell you, go back and say the things that we found 2 weeks after 9/11, and we were obsessed with this subject. We were on her computers literally 20 hours a day. She was taking a nap, and I was there on the computer, and I was taking a nap, and she was on the computer, and literally this was going on forever. Because we kept on finding things. We were doing like a spider web where we would find one individual or one group name, and then we were leading off of that. So we found a charity run out of Deerfield Beach, Florida, called the Health Resource Center for Palestine, which was connected to this mosque because one of the co-founders of the mosque, Syed Ahmad, and the head of this this charity, Health Resource Center for Palestine, the head of this charity, whose name was Lamia Hashim, she was a school teacher for the Islamic Center. At the time, the Islamic Center had no outside school. They were doing schooling for children inside the mosque. Today, they have a huge school outside of this 27 or 30,000 square foot mosque that they were trying to build with seed money from a terrorist organization from Al Qaeda. So this individual is interesting because while he's going to school at FAU and while he's involved in this terrorist charity, he is also the creator and the webmaster for what was then the official website for the Islamic Association of Gaza, Al-Jamia Al-Islamiyya. We know of that organization because they are the parent organization of Hamas. It's the Muslim Brotherhood of Gaza. It's the organization that was created prior to Hamas being created. And this organization was founded by people like Ahmed Yassin, the guy in the wheelchair that was blown up from the Israelis, thank God. The Abdullah Azzam, the mentor of Osama bin Laden, who also was blown up, but I think Osama may have done that. Anyway, so he created the website for this organization. So major ties to Hamas through the mosque and also through the charity. Well, the vice president of this charity, and I also want to say one more thing. When we were doing all of this research, we came across a lot of organizations and a lot of charities, such as this health resource center. And I started meeting with the feds on all of these organizations. And within years, at least a half dozen of the charities that we supplied information for, they were actually shut down, including one charity based in Israel itself, the sister organization for this health resource center. One organization you may have heard of is called Kind Hearts. Kind Hearts was an organization based in Toledo, Ohio. The reason why we came in contact with that group was because the head of that group was giving Khalid Smaili was giving a speech for a fundraiser again for the Islamic Center, and he was trying to raise funds for this new Islamic Center that was built today. So thank God these charities were shut down by the Bush administration. Anyway, there was an individual that was the vice president of this health resource center for Palestine, and his name was and is Sofian Abdelaziz Zakout. Well, some pronounce his name Zakut. I don't really know what the is it Zakut? I don't. But this is Sofian, by the way. Now, what's interesting about this individual is he has no qualms about posting things on the internet. This is him in a keffiyeh, appearing to, I believe, the public looking like a common everyday terrorist, Palestinian terrorist. He's originally from Gaza. He came to the United States. Unfortunately, today he holds a citizenship in the United States. But he's also an individual that was a vice president of a terrorist charity, a Hamas-related terrorist charity. So a few years back, he put on an event also co-run by CARE and other organizations, the Islamic Circle of North America, another, which I'd love to speak about, but I don't think I have time to. And these organizations, so they put on this pro-Hamas rally outside of the Israeli consulate in Miami, and during the rally, people are chanting, "We are Hamas, we are Hamas." Sofian Zakout is shown on video smiling while this crowd is chanting, "We are Hamas." Well, Mr. Zakout, he would smile when this crowd would chant, "We are Hamas," because this individual was and is involved with Hamas. As I mentioned, he was involved with a Hamas charity. He's the vice president of this organization, but he openly admits, I can't really read this from here, but he says in one of these, Hamas is in my heart and on my head. He after the event was over, he wrote, and these things were written in Arabic actually, he wrote in Arabic, "Thank God we conquer the American Jews like our conquest over the Israeli Jews every day." This is one of the pictures that he posted onto his Facebook page. It's interesting because it has Hamas individuals like Yahya Ayush, was it? Yasin? I don't know. The engineer, the Palestinian engineer who was blown up by the Israelis with a cell phone. It has Osama bin Laden himself up there, Osama bin Laden's mentor, Abdullah Azzam, Ahmed Yassin from Hamas, a lot of individuals from Hamas and Al-Qaeda. He openly posts, pictures of Hamas founders and Hamas leaders and Hamas militants and others. He loves posting this picture. This is a big picture for him, and it has some symbolism. If you notice, you have all of these organizations, many of the terrorist organizations that are fighting against the Israelis out of Gaza and the West Bank. You have Hamas and Islamic Jihad and Fatah and the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, all surrounding a map of what we know as Israel draped in a Palestinian flag. Obviously, he's showing that these terrorist organizations should work together to destroy Israel. That's what I get from this. Here's something that he posted, a report about how the Holocaust was faked. Now, this is also very interesting about this individual. This individual loves David Duke, the former Ku Klux Klan leader. And in fact, if you go to Front Page Magazine right now, you'll see my latest article, and I discuss these new postings that this guy's account made about David Duke. And I bring up all of the old stuff as well. So he loves David Duke. He says David Duke is a man to believe in. That's what he writes over one of Duke's videos. Now, again, just like the Islamic Center of Boca Raton, with people like Ted Deutsch speaking in front of the organization, there's also a danger with regards to this individual beyond the fact that he should not exist inside the United States. You know, no one that's involved with a Hamas organization or posting pictures of people from Hamas or talking about Jews, calling Jews repeatedly pigs and monkeys, as he keeps on doing over and over again. No individual like that should exist inside the United States. But what's worse about this individual, just like with the mosque, is that this individual is involved with anti-crime organizations. This individual sits on the board of directors of Citizens Crime Watch in Miami-Dade County. This individual sits on the board of directors of Crime Stoppers in Miami-Dade County. Now, I've personally spoken to the leaders of this organization, one of which told me about a half a year ago that he was going to be dumped from the organization, and that never happened. I keep on speaking to people involved with the board of directors, and unfortunately, they're too cowardly to drop this guy from their organization. Now, God bless the police. I love the police. You know, I'm all about Blue Lives Matter. But here in these organizations, you also have a number of individuals high ranking in law enforcement in Miami-Dade County. And unfortunately, they too are willing to overlook the fact that this guy that they have in their organization was involved in a Hamas charity, loves Hamas, openly says he's a member of Hamas online, keeps on using the word we whenever he talks about Hamas, talks about Jews as they're pigs and monkeys, even loves David Duke, you know, a strange connection between him, but this guy's involved with anti-crime organizations, and it's a danger to our society. And how much time do I have? Do I have any time? So, okay, I want to talk about something important outside of this, something that I found a few years back. But it's very interesting, and it's very important to discuss. So I've written a lot of articles about something called the Islamic Circle of North America, or ICNA, ICNA. This organization was created originally in the late 1960s, early 70s in the United States. They were the American arm to Jamaat-e-Islami in Pakistan, or Jamaat-e-Islami in South Asia. Jamaat-e-Islami is the Muslim Brotherhood of South Asia. Came to South Asia in the 1940s. Today, they have a huge organization within Pakistan and India and Bangladesh. They were involved in the what I would call a Holocaust against the Bangladeshi citizens in the 1970s. I think in 1971, the massacre that took place in Bangladesh against, and it was actually against a lot of Muslims as well. In fact, I've worked with Muslims regarding this particular issue, and thank God the Bangladeshi government has has recently gone after some of these death squad leaders that were going around murdering people. Up to 3 million people were murdered in Bangladesh. And a lot of it came out of this Islamic Circle of North America organization. So one thing that I found regarding the Islamic Circle, which affects us in the United States and everyone around the world, quite frankly, is, you see, many of these organizations, like this Zakat individual, he runs a group called the American Muslim Association of North America. He is actually what we could call the head Muslim of all of South Florida. He is from Palm Beach down to Miami-Dade. When Homeland Security wanted to give out grants to mosque goers for counterterrorism reasons, for anti-terrorism reasons, one of the first person that they went to in South Florida was this guy, Zakat. Why? Because he's affiliated with at least 24 mosques running from Palm Beach down to Miami-Dade. So he runs this organization called the American Muslim Association of North America out of Miami-Dade. And he received at one time, it's probably a lot more money than this, but he received $70,000 from Homeland Security at one time. And I'm sure he's gotten more than that. Why am I sure he's gotten more than that? Because there's a lot of Islamic organizations inside the United States that openly get money from FEMA. Now, why do they get money from FEMA? Just like any nonprofit organization that wants to do relief work in the United States or outside of the United States, the Islamic Circle of North America and Zakat's organization as well, they apply for funds from the U.S. government, from FEMA, in order to do so. So when there is an earthquake in Pakistan, or a tsunami in Indonesia, or a fire in California, these organizations get money from the federal government in order to fight these things. Now, a lot of this money has no oversight attached to it. So these organizations get lump sums of money, and you don't know how much money they're getting for their salaries. You don't know how much money they're shipping overseas. Now, the shipping overseas is the important part. Because a lot of these organizations, and I'll tell you what I had discovered way back when, they have a game that they play. So in the United States, we have a terrorism list, a list of terrorist organizations run from the State Department. Right? The State Department has this list. Many of you, I'm sure, have seen this list with Hamas and Al-Qaeda and all these organizations on it. Well, there's a lot of organizations that are not on the list that maybe you and I would consider terrorist organizations. So what happens if a Muslim Brotherhood organization in the United States, like the Islamic Circle of North America, wants to give money to a group, let's say, like Hamas, which is located in Gaza? How do they do that? Well, they can't go directly to Hamas to give the money, because that would be illegal, and that would be grounds for the federal government to come on top of them like a ton of bricks. I don't know if that would happen under Obama, but God willing, under Trump, that would be the case. It was the case under the Bush administration, and I would hope again that it would happen today. So what do they do instead? They give money to an organization that they're affiliated with, that's also affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood, which in turn would give the money to Hamas. So what I found was that the Islamic Circle of North America, this was 2007, I believe, it happened in 2006, 2007, they were the top donor to what I would call their parent organization in Pakistan, what I said, Jamaat-e-Islami. This parent organization located in Pakistan, the parent organization of an American organization. So they become the top donor to this organization, and right away this organization takes the money and goes on a trip to meet at the head of Hamas at the time, the head of Hamas, Khalid Mashal, at his residence, at his home, to give him $100,000. And he in turn, and I'm getting this all off of their website, he in turn, because they put it up, they don't know that people are actually looking at this from outside or translating it from outside. He in turn thanked the organizations and said to them that the money would be used to further terrorist attacks against the Israeli government. Not exactly in those words, but that's what he was saying. So here you have an American organization that's getting money to a third party that's getting money to a group that's on the U.S. terrorism list. And in Pakistan, they don't really care who that money goes to. If the money goes to Hamas or what have you, there's no laws in Pakistan like there are in the United States. Anyway, with that, I'll take any questions.
Hi, I tried before and they told me that I should speak to Claire Lopez,
Okay.
But I'm going to try for you, Joe.
Well, I'm not exactly on the level of the great Claire Lopez, but I will try to answer your question.
Okay, I'm just curious, if Egypt is saying that the Muslim Brotherhood is a terrorist organization, and McMaster seems to be giving the impression that he doesn't want to say that the Muslim Brotherhood is, what the heck is going on?
So, what I would say to you is, first of all, thank you, Ted Cruz, for pushing this issue to be voted in Congress on naming the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization. I would love to see that happen, and for a number of reasons. Number one, because they're a terrorist organization. In fact, Hamas was created from the Muslim Brotherhood, so if Hamas is a terrorist organization, then certainly its parent organization should be considered a terrorist organization. But imagine the fallout if the Muslim Brotherhood would be named a terrorist organization. I was talking to someone here previously about that. Where's Alex? Anyway, but what if the Muslim Brotherhood were named a terrorist organization, then all of these groups in the United States, including CARE and ISNA and ICNA and all these organizations that were actually created from the Muslim Brotherhood, which we know for a fact they were. I mean, we have the proof of these organizations being associated with the Muslim Brotherhood. Certainly, we have a proof of CARE being associated with Hamas itself. Imagine I'm sure it would go to the courts, but you have a good percentage of the mosques inside the United States, certainly the one I mentioned and many, many others that are associated with the Brotherhood, where their imams actually came from the Brotherhood overseas because the Saudis at the time, maybe not today, because right now the Saudis don't like Muslim Brotherhood so much, but way back when, they would purposely put people from the Brotherhood in as imams of these mosques. Imagine how much we could get accomplished in getting rid of these evil organizations from the United States if the Muslim Brotherhood would be named a terrorist organization. And yes, if Egypt's willing to call it a terrorist organization, if the Saudis are willing to call it a terrorist organization, hey, the United States should call it a terrorist organization as well, and I'm entirely in favor of that.
Real quick to your question, and I think this is why the Trump administration stumbled over designating the Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. Within U.S. law, there are 3 criteria that all 3 must be met for a group to be on the State Department FTO list. Number 1, it has to be a foreign organization. Number 2, it has to have committed a terrorist act or acts plural that threaten United States national security. And number 3, it has to retain the ability and the intent to commit terrorist acts that threaten United States national security. Obviously, the Muslim Brotherhood meets the first criterion perfectly well. The problem is that it has never, ever committed an act of terrorism against the United States or U.S. national security.
But that's, forgive me, that's not entirely true, because you have Hamas, which is the Muslim Brotherhood.
It's not derivative. You can't go up or down the org chart. It has to be the group itself.
You also have the Muslim Brotherhood. One of the founders of the Gaza Muslim Brotherhood, who came from the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood, Abdullah Azzam, the mentor of Osama bin Laden, who was involved with Al-Qaeda, I think that's a big deal also as a connection to the Muslim Brotherhood. But I wouldn't suggest that, just like I wouldn't suggest that the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade that's associated with Fatah, I would suggest that, considering that the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade is on the U.S. terrorism list, then Fatah, its parent organization, should be on the terrorism list as well, because first of all, they shared a website for many, many years, and they share terrorist acts against Americans. So I would say the same thing with the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas. If Hamas is on the U.S. terrorism list, then its parent organization should be as well. I would also say, which is also something of interest, that you have, with regards to Osama bin Laden, when Osama bin Laden was killed, this organization that I mentioned, the Islamic Circle of North America, which is an American organization, you have an organization called the Hizbul Mujahideen, located in Pakistan and Kashmir, which is the militant organization of Jamaat-e-Islami. I would say that there's grounds, even though it's part of Jamaat-e-Islami, that Hizbul Mujahideen, since they own the property where Osama bin Laden was harbored and murdered, that this organization should be on the U.S. terrorism list, and their parent organization, Jamaat-e-Islami, which is a Muslim Brotherhood organization in Pakistan and India and Bangladesh, should be on the terrorism list as well. But I think it's debatable. I think it's highly debatable for the connection between the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas. For me, they're one and the same.
When President Obama was elected, if I'm not mistaken, there were recorded about 200 or so mosques in the country. And when he was out of there were over 2,000 in the country, if I'm not mistaken. But
I think you're lowballing that number severely.
It's over 3,000.
Thank you. Because my question is, I just came from that glorious state of New York with the glorious Mayor de Blasio, who was so anti-profiling. That's a dirty word when it comes to trying to find the bad guys. And profiling is what helped the city of New York during Giuliani's administration. My question is, with the Boca Raton Mosque that you're talking about and all these mosques across the country, has anybody stepped up to the plate yet to really say, we're going to start throwing some cameras outside these mosques and see who's going in there because they might be bad guys?
Unfortunately, there are cameras being put up on the mosques, but they're not being put up by the feds. They're being put up by people like Zakout, who's getting money from the feds in order to put the cameras up so that they can watch the feds watch them. It's the opposite. If you look in New York City, you have the Al Farouk Mosque. We know for a fact the Al Farouk Mosque, they house the Al Qifa Refugee Center, the precursor, one of the precursors to Al Qaeda in the United States, set up to perform the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center. Why this mosque is still in existence, is a disgrace. It's an embarrassment to our country that this mosque still exists after what this mosque was involved with. My colleague Bela Rabinowitz, it wasn't so long ago, we're not talking about way back when with the 93 bombing. We're talking about in recent years. She had went to the mosque, and they're still selling books written by the blind sheikh, Omar Abdel Rahman, who was the spiritual leader of the 93 bombing at that mosque. So for me, these things should be shut down. And for me, the best way to do that legally is by placing the Muslim Brotherhood on the U.S. terror list, and I think there's a way to do that. And God willing, I'm congressman. I'm going to push that issue. Anyway, thank you.
Real quick, polling center, Islamic Center, Boca Raton. What's the status of it? Because it would address that little issue real quick.
The polling center, right? Yeah. So thank you for mentioning that. So one of the other things outside of the great Ted Deutsch, and I say that facetiously, going to speak in front of them, as along the same lines of what I'm saying with the legitimizing of these centers, this mosque was named a polling place for to vote. And thank God, Alan Bergstein and others, am I saying that correctly? You got involved in that? There were people speaking out. This is the great thing. This is the thing, people always ask me and others involved in the work that I do. I'm sure many people, in here were asked that same question. What can I do? What can I do? Well, one person screaming may not be enough. But when you have a community getting involved and doing that screaming, even though the people, which was disgusting out of the media, but it's the media, so that's what they do. But even though those who are screaming, who are using, the material that I showed you and other things to say about this mosque, they're saying, look at the evidence to show that this place should not have anything to do with voting in the United States. In fact, this center shouldn't exist inside the United States, let alone people voting in an important election from this place. So thank God people used their voice, and there were enough people that were heard. And the supervisor of elections, who didn't want to do it, I believe, she stopped the mosque from being a polling center. Now, in the end, the people that screamed were maybe labeled anti-Muslim or Islamophobe or what have you, but they did the right thing. And in the end, and in the end, as a consequence of them doing the right thing, the polling place was moved to another place. Thank God, and hopefully in the near future that center won't exist, as I said.
Point out that Mark Campbell went undercover and got that meeting on camera.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark.
Okay, any further questions you can ask Joanne in the foyer, if you would.
If anybody wants to donate, please.